It was a crisp morning at JFK International Airport when Raj Patel boarded his flight to San Francisco. As a successful tech company CEO, he was accustomed to flying first class, having earned his way up from humble beginnings. His navy blue suit was pressed perfectly, and his laptop bag contained presentations for a major investors meeting the next day. As he settled into his first-class seat, 3A, flight attendant Betty Williams passed by. She stopped abruptly, her smile fading as she looked at Raj. "Excuse me," she said loudly, making other passengers turn their heads. "I think you might be confused. Economy class is towards the back." Raj looked up, momentarily puzzled. He'd faced such assumptions before, but it still stung each time. With practiced patience, he reached for his boarding pass. "Actually, I'm in the correct seat. Here's my ticket." Betty barely glanced at it. "Are you sure you didn't accidentally walk through the wrong section?" "This is first class," she emphasized, her voice carrying across the cabin. Several passengers were now watching the interaction unfold. "Yes, I'm aware," Raj replied calmly, though his heart was racing. "I'm in my assigned seat, 3A. Would you like to check my boarding pass again?" Instead of apologizing, Betty crossed her arms. "Well, we need to be certain. There must be some mistake in the system. This section has certain standards." Her emphasis on the last word made several passengers gasp. A young woman in 3B couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Excuse me," she interrupted, pulling out her phone, "but what exactly are these standards you're referring to?" She had already started recording the interaction, concerned by what she was witnessing. Betty's face flushed red as she noticed other passengers watching disapprovingly. One elderly gentleman in 2C removed his reading glasses and spoke up. "Young lady, I've been flying this airline for 40 years, and I've never seen such unprofessional behavior." The situation was escalating quickly. Other flight attendants noticed the commotion, and the lead flight attendant, David Chen, approached to assess the situation. Raj remained composed, though the humiliation of being singled out in front of a full cabin weighed heavily on him. "Is there a problem here?" David asked, looking between Betty and Raj. Before Betty could respond, several passengers began speaking up, explaining what they'd witnessed. David's face grew serious as he understood the gravity of the situation. "Sir, I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding," David said to Raj, shooting a stern look at Betty. "Please be assured that this isn't representative of our airline's values. Can I get you anything to make your flight more comfortable?" The young woman who had been recording stopped her video but kept her phone ready. She had captured everything, from Betty's initial approach to the other passengers' interventions. What no one knew at that moment was how this video would spark a nationwide conversation about prejudice in the airline industry. Betty stood there, her face now a mix of embarrassment and defiance. She had been with the airline for 15 years and had never been called out like this. As she was escorted away by David, the reality of her actions began to sink in. Meanwhile, Raj sat quietly, responding to work emails, trying to process what had just happened. He had faced discrimination before, but never so publicly, never with so many witnesses. Little did he know, this incident would become a turning point not just for him, but for the entire airline industry's approach to diversity and inclusion. As the plane prepared for takeoff, passengers around Raj offered words of support and shared their own stories. What started as a humiliating moment was transforming into something more significant, a catalyst for change that would soon reach far beyond the confines of Flight 786 to San Francisco. The video that would change everything started with a simple notification. Lai Wei, a software engineer sitting in seat 3B, had only posted one video before on her social media, a cat video that got 12 likes. But this time was different. By the time Flight 786 touched down in San Francisco, her recording of the incident had already started making waves. Her hands trembled as she watched the view counter climb. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 views. The comments section exploded with similar stories from travelers worldwide. "Just watched this happen on my flight to SFO. The passenger handled it with such grace. This needs to be addressed at airline official," she wrote in her follow-up post. During the 6-hour flight, Lai had gotten to know Raj better. She learned about his journey from a small apartment above his parents' convenience store to becoming a CEO. They talked about their shared experiences with prejudice, but also about their hopes for change. News outlets started picking up the story. The video showed everything clearly: Betty's condescending tone, the shocked faces of other passengers, and Raj's dignified response. Social media experts called it a perfect storm, a clear example of bias that couldn't be explained away. Local news stations were already waiting at SFO when the flight landed. Betty quickly disappeared through employee exits, while Raj found himself surrounded by reporters. "I'm not interested in anyone losing their job," he told them calmly. "What I want is for this to be a learning moment for everyone." Lee's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Major news networks were requesting permission to use her footage. Civil rights organizations reached out, asking to share the video. By evening, #FlyingWhaleBrown and #FirstClassIsleAsian were trending nationwide. The airline's social media team scrambled to respond. Their first statement was brief: "We are aware of the incident and are investigating." This only fueled more outrage. People began sharing their own stories of discrimination on flights, creating a virtual tsunami of experiences that could no longer be ignored. Corporate offices worldwide started using the video in their training sessions. Other airlines watched carefully, knowing they could easily face similar scrutiny. The incident was becoming a case study in how quickly a single moment of bias could become a global conversation. Back in her hotel room that night, Lai struggled with her newfound viral fame. She had only wanted to stand up for what was right, but now found herself at the center of a movement. Her video had struck a chord because it showed something many had experienced, but few had captured so clearly. Meanwhile, Raj sat in his own hotel room, preparing for tomorrow's investor meeting, while his phone exploded with messages of support. Friends, family, and strangers alike reached out to share their stories and thank him for his composure in the face of discrimination. The video had done something powerful. It had made the invisible visible. People who had never experienced such discrimination could now see it clearly, while those who had lived through similar moments finally felt seen and heard. By midnight, the video had reached over 1 million views. News anchors were discussing it on late-night shows. Social media analysts noted how the incident had sparked a larger conversation about everyday discrimination and the power of bystanders who choose to speak up. What made the video particularly compelling was its rawness. There was no editing, no dramatic music, just real people in a real situation, showing both the worst and best of human nature. It captured not only Betty's prejudice, but also the passengers who spoke up against it. As the day drew to a close, no one involved could have predicted how this single incident would ripple through society, challenging assumptions and changing policies. The power of the moment wasn't just in the discrimination captured on camera. It was in how it forced everyone who watched it to ask themselves, "What would I have done in that situation?" Little did anyone know, this was just the beginning of a story that would transform not just an airline, but an entire industry's approach to diversity and inclusion. The video wasn't just trending, it was becoming a movement. The morning after the flight incident, news channels buzzed with breaking updates. Lai Wei's video had reached 5 million views overnight, sparking intense debates across morning shows and social media platforms. The video's impact grew as media outlets dissected every frame. People noticed small details: how Betty's tone changed when speaking to other passengers, the supportive nods from nearby travelers, and Raj's remarkable composure. Each viewing revealed new layers to the story. Twitter erupted with hashtags. #FirstClassDiscrimination and #FlightQuality dominated trending topics. Celebrity influencers shared the video, adding their own experiences. Even politicians began weighing in, calling for industry-wide changes in airline policies. The airline's PR team faced their biggest crisis in years. Their initial response, a brief statement about investigating the matter, only fueled public outrage. Social media users dug deeper, uncovering similar incidents from the past that had gone unaddressed. Traditional media picked up the story next. Morning shows featured panels discussing systemic bias in the service industry. Aviation experts explained how subtle discrimination persisted despite diversity training programs. Everyone had an opinion, but few had solutions. Lee's inbox flooded with interview requests. Good Morning America, CNN, and major newspapers all wanted exclusive coverage. She felt overwhelmed, but determined to use this platform responsibly. "This isn't about one video going viral," she told reporters. "It's about countless similar experiences that happen every day." Meanwhile, Rage's tech company received hundreds of supportive messages. Business leaders praised his dignity under pressure. Young professionals shared how his response gave them courage to handle similar situations. The incident was becoming a teaching moment for corporate America. Aviation forums lit up with discussions. Flight attendants shared their perspectives, many acknowledging unconscious biases in their industry. Some defended Betty, citing job pressures, while others insisted accountability was necessary for change. The story gained international attention by afternoon. European and Asian news outlets covered it extensively, sparking global conversations about discrimination in international travel. Airlines worldwide began reviewing their training protocols, worried they might face similar scrutiny. Social media analysts noted something unique about this video spread. It wasn't just anger driving shares. People were moved by the positive elements too: passengers speaking up, the lead flight attendant's professional intervention, and Rage's dignified response. Civil rights organizations saw an opportunity for meaningful change. They'd reached out to both Rage and the airline, proposing collaborative solutions rather than just criticism. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about transformation. As the video continued spreading, unexpected voices joined the conversation. Former flight attendants shared stories of witnessing discrimination but feeling powerless to intervene. Pilots discussed the need for better leadership in creating inclusive environments. By evening, the airline announced a press conference for the following day. Speculation ran wild about their response. Would they fire Betty? Announce new policies? The world waited to see how they'd handle this pivotal moment. The incident had touched a nerve because it wasn't just about first-class seating, it represented everyday experiences of prejudice faced by millions. The video had put a face to statistics, making the abstract personal and undeniable. As day turned to night, discussion groups formed online, sharing similar stories and brainstorming solutions. The conversation was evolving from outrage to action, from pointing fingers to proposing changes. The power of this viral moment lay in its authenticity. There was no script, no agenda, just real people in a real situation, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about bias in everyday life. As part 3 of this story concluded, one thing was clear: this wasn't just another viral video that would fade away. It was becoming a catalyst for genuine change, and the next 24 hours would prove crucial in determining exactly what that change would look like. Copy. The airline's corporate headquarters buzzed with nervous energy on the morning of their press conference. Their CEO, Richard Thompson, paced in his office, reviewing his statement for the 10th time. The company's response would define not just their future, but potentially reshape airline industry standards. At exactly 9 a.m., Thompson stepped onto the podium, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. The room fell silent as he began. "First, I want to apologize personally to our passenger. What happened on Flight 786 was unacceptable and does not reflect our values." But what came next surprised everyone. Instead of a generic corporate response, Thompson revealed troubling internal data. Their own audits had uncovered dozens of similar incidents over the past year, most unreported. Betty's actions weren't an isolated case. They were a symptom of a deeper problem. "Today, we're announcing immediate changes," Thompson declared. He outlined a comprehensive plan: mandatory monthly diversity training, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, and a new passenger advocacy office. The airline would invest $50 million in these initiatives. As Thompson spoke, social media exploded with reactions. Some praised the transparency, while others questioned why it took a viral video to prompt these changes. Industry analysts noted this was unprecedented. No major airline had ever admitted to systemic discrimination so openly. Behind the scenes, the airline's legal team had advised against such candor. But Thompson, whose own daughter had faced similar discrimination while traveling, chose authenticity over corporate caution. "We can't fix what we won't acknowledge," he told reporters. The press conference took an unexpected turn when Thompson invited several former employees to speak. They shared their experiences of wanting to report discrimination but feeling powerless. One former flight attendant's voice cracked as she described being told to pick her battles. Li Wei, watching from her office, felt a mix of relief and responsibility. A simple act of recording had forced a corporate giant to confront its flaws publicly. Her phone buzzed with a message. Other major airlines were already announcing their own policy reviews. The conference's most powerful moment came when Thompson addressed Betty directly through the cameras. "We failed you too," he said. "We failed to provide the training and support needed to overcome unconscious biases. This isn't about punishment, it's about growth." Industry experts called it a masterclass in crisis management. Instead of damage control, the airline had chosen transformation. Their stock initially dropped 3%, but customer loyalty scores began rising as people appreciated the honesty. Throughout the day, other airlines scrambled to respond. Some rushed out statements about their existing diversity programs. Others quickly announced new initiatives. The industry was changing in real time, pushed by one company's decision to face its problems head-on. The press conference ended with Thompson sharing a personal story about his immigrant parents and their experiences with discrimination. "This isn't just about policies," he concluded. "It's about seeing each other's humanity." By evening, the airline's new initiatives were being praised by civil rights organizations and business schools alike. What could have been a PR disaster had become a moment of genuine corporate responsibility. Meanwhile, Reg watched the press conference from his office, feeling cautiously optimistic. He received a personal call from Thompson earlier, asking for his input on the new policies. Maybe, he thought, real change is possible. As day turned to night, a new hashtag started trending, #BetterSkies. People weren't just talking about one airline anymore, they were imagining what truly inclusive air travel could look like. The corporate response had transformed a crisis into an opportunity for industry-wide evolution. The press conference had done something remarkable. It had turned corporate speak into human conversation, policy changes into personal growth, and a PR crisis into a moment of genuine transformation. As investigators dug deeper into the airline's records, a disturbing pattern emerged. Betty's incident with Raj wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was part of a larger story that needed to be told. Human Resources uncovered 5 previous complaints against Betty over the past 3 years, all filed by passengers of color. Each complaint described similar behavior, questioning seat assignments, making subtle remarks about standards, and creating uncomfortable situations in first class. The lead investigator, Mrs. Lee, sat at her desk reviewing security footage from previous flights. She noticed how Betty's behavior changed depending on the passenger's appearance. With some passengers, she was warm and welcoming. With others, particularly those of Asian or Middle Eastern descent, her demeanor became noticeably colder. "This goes beyond one flight attendant," Mrs. Lee wrote in her preliminary report. "It's about a system that allowed these incidents to be buried in paperwork." The investigation revealed more troubling details. Other flight attendants had noticed Betty's behavior but stayed quiet. Some admitted feeling pressure to maintain a certain image in first class, an unspoken code that often worked against passengers of color. Raj's tech background played a crucial role in exposing these systemic issues. As a successful CEO who had built his company's reputation on data transparency, his experience carried extra weight. Media outlets began connecting his story to broader discussions about discrimination in corporate America. The airline's internal messaging system buzzed with discussions. Young flight attendants shared their own struggles with addressing bias. Senior crew members debated how industry culture had evolved, or failed to evolve, over decades. During a particularly intense meeting, one of Betty's former colleagues broke down. "We all saw it happening," she admitted. "We just didn't know how to speak up without risking our jobs." The investigation expanded beyond Betty. Training materials were reviewed, revealing outdated concepts and subtle biases in their language. Even the airline's marketing materials showed a clear lack of diversity in their first-class advertisements. Li Wei's video had opened a Pandora's box. Other passengers started sending in their own recordings of similar incidents across different airlines. What began as one viral moment was becoming an industry-wide examination of systemic bias. Industry experts noted how Raj's position as a tech CEO added another layer to the story. Here was someone who could have easily chartered private flights, choosing instead to use commercial airlines like any other passenger. His experience highlighted how success doesn't shield people from prejudice. By week's end, Mrs. Lee's team had compiled a comprehensive report. It didn't just focus on Betty. It exposed a culture that had normalized subtle discrimination. The findings would force the airline industry to confront its biases in ways it never had before. As evening fell, Mrs. Lee added a final note to her report. This investigation isn't just about one incident or one employee. It's about acknowledging a problem that has existed in plain sight for far too long. The report would become a turning point, not just for one airline, but for an industry that could no longer ignore its systemic issues. The truth had finally come to light, and there was no turning back. What started as a viral video had evolved into something much more significant, a mirror reflecting decades of unconscious bias in the airline industry. The next steps would determine whether real change was possible or if this would become just another forgotten headline. The airline's commitment to change moved beyond just words into real action. Over the next few weeks, the company rolled out the most comprehensive diversity and inclusion program the aviation industry had ever seen. Training rooms across the country filled with flight attendants, ground staff, and pilots. The new program, called Open Skies, Open Minds, wasn't your typical corporate training. It featured real stories from passengers and employees, including snippets from Lee Wei's viral video. The airline partnered with Raj's tech company to develop an innovative reporting system. Using artificial intelligence and data analytics, it could identify patterns of bias in customer service interactions. Every complaint, every incident, every piece of feedback was now traceable and actionable. During one training session in Chicago, a flight attendant with 20 years of experience raised her hand. "I never realized how many small decisions I make based on appearance," she admitted, her voice trembling. "This training has opened my eyes." The changes weren't just internal. The airline redesigned its booking system to remove any potential for bias. First-class passenger photos were removed from crew briefing materials. Service standards were rewritten to emphasize respect and dignity for all passengers. Other airlines took notice. United, Delta, and American Airlines sent representatives to observe the training sessions. Industry conferences added diversity and inclusion panels to their agendas. What started as one airline's crisis response was becoming an industry standard. Passenger feedback started showing positive changes. Comments about feeling more welcome and truly valued increased across all cabin classes. The airline's customer satisfaction scores rose steadily, particularly among minority passengers. The program's success caught the attention of other industries. Hotels, restaurants, and retail chains began requesting information about the training model. The airline's approach to addressing systemic bias was becoming a case study in corporate transformation. In the operations center, new monitors displayed real-time feedback from passengers. Any potential bias incidents triggered immediate alerts, allowing for quick intervention. The system, nicknamed FairFlight, was revolutionary in its approach to preventing discrimination. Flight crews reported feeling more confident in their interactions with passengers. The fear of saying the wrong thing was replaced with tools for respectful communication. Monthly workshops allowed staff to share experiences and learn from each other. The airline's marketing team launched a new campaign, Everyone's First Class. It featured diverse passengers sharing their travel stories, breaking down stereotypes about who belongs in premium cabins. Investment in these changes proved worthwhile. The airline's stock price recovered and surpassed its pre-incident levels. Customer loyalty programs saw increased enrollment from minority communities. Industry analysts praised the company's leadership in addressing systemic bias. Raj himself became an informal advisor to the airline's board. His experience in tech innovation helped shape their approach to using data for positive change. "Technology can help us be better humans," he often said in meetings. 6 months after the incident, the Airline Industry magazine featured the company's transformation on its cover. The article praised their courage to change and detailed how their new policies were reshaping aviation standards. The most significant change was in the day-to-day interactions. Flight attendants reported feeling more authentic in their service, freed from unconscious biases they didn't know they carried. Passengers noticed the difference. The atmosphere on board felt more genuinely welcoming. This wasn't just about avoiding another viral video. It was about creating lasting change in an industry that touched millions of lives daily. The airline had turned a moment of crisis into an opportunity for genuine transformation, setting a new standard for corporate responsibility in the process. 1 year after the viral video incident, a remarkable transformation had occurred. The story's final chapter wasn't just about policies or training, it was about personal growth and redemption. Betty, who had faced intense public criticism, emerged changed. After 6 months of counseling and cultural sensitivity training, she requested a meeting with Raj. The airline's PR team advised against it, but both Betty and Raj felt it was necessary for closure. They met in a quiet coffee shop in San Francisco. Betty's hands shook as she stirred her coffee. "I spent months thinking about that day," she began. "I didn't see myself as prejudiced, but watching that video opened my eyes to my own biases." Raj listened quietly as Betty shared her journey. She had grown up in a small town with limited exposure to diversity. Her biases were deep-rooted but unconscious. The viral incident forced her to confront them. What surprised everyone was Betty's next move. Instead of leaving the airline industry, she asked to become part of the solution. She started sharing her story at training sessions, turning her mistake into a powerful teaching moment. "I was that person who said, 'I don't see color,'" she would tell new flight attendants. But not seeing color meant not seeing people's experiences, their struggles, their dignity. Li Wei's video had found its way into diversity training programs beyond airlines. Universities used it in business ethics classes. Corporate consultants showed it during workshops. The incident had become a case study in both what goes wrong and how to make it right. The airline industry itself had evolved. First-class cabins across all major carriers now reflected true diversity. Customer service metrics showed significant improvements in passenger satisfaction across all demographics. Raj's tech company launched a nonprofit foundation focused on workplace inclusion. The foundation's first project, a virtual reality training program that helped people experience and understand everyday discrimination. The most powerful moment came during an aviation industry conference. Betty and Raj shared the stage, discussing how one incident changed both their lives. The audience sat silent as Betty described her transformation from symbol of bias to advocate for change. "Success isn't about never making mistakes," Raj told the audience. "It's about how we learn from them." His words resonated through the industry, encouraging others to confront their own biases openly and honestly. 1 year later, Li Wei's video was still being viewed, but now for different reasons. It was no longer just about exposing discrimination, it had become a story of how confronting uncomfortable truths could lead to meaningful change. The airline's transformation inspired others. Companies across different industries started asking harder questions about their own practices. The incident had sparked a wider conversation about creating truly inclusive spaces. As Betty finished her last training session of the year, she looked at a group photo from her first day as a flight attendant. "I thought I knew what service meant," she reflected. "Now I understand it's about seeing and respecting each person's humanity." The story that began with a moment of discrimination had evolved into something more, a testament to the possibility of change, both personal and systemic. It proved that even the most difficult moments could become catalysts for transformation. On the anniversary of the incident, Raj boarded another flight to San Francisco. This time, every passenger was welcomed with the same warmth, respect, and dignity. The skies had indeed become friendlier for everyone.